The particle accelerator hummed with the power of 1,000 lightning strikes as Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the quantum field readings spike beyond anything she'd ever witnessed in 15 years of breakthrough physics research. At 3:17 a.m. in the Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island, New York, the coffee in her Stanford University mug still steamed while the most dangerous experiment in human history was about to tear reality itself apart. And Eleanor had no idea that in exactly 72 hours, every dimension in existence would either be saved or destroyed forever by the choice she was about to make. The first portal opened with a sound like the universe screaming. Before we reveal what emerged from that impossible tear in space-time, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't believe how this brilliant scientist battles interdimensional invaders to save every reality that ever existed. Drop a comment and tell us what you would do if hostile creatures from another dimension invaded our world. Elena stumbled backward from the control console as the air itself seemed to fracture, revealing glimpses of landscapes that defied every law of physics she'd devoted her life to understanding. Through the shimmering breach, she caught sight of floating mountains suspended in purple skies, crystalline forests that sang in harmonious frequencies, and something else. Something moving with predatory intelligence through the dimensional gateway she'd accidentally created. The equations on her whiteboard, covered in her careful handwriting about quantum entanglement and parallel universe theory, suddenly seemed as relevant as a child's crayon drawing compared to the impossibility unfolding before her eyes. The creature that stepped through the portal stood 7 feet tall, with translucent skin that revealed circuitry pulsing with alien light, its multiple eyes scanning the laboratory with the calculating precision of a predator evaluating prey. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she realized that everything she'd believed about the boundaries between dimensions had been catastrophically wrong, and this thing, whatever it was, had been waiting on the other side for someone foolish enough to open the door. Dr. Elena Vasquez had always been the smartest person in any room, ever since she'd started reading quantum physics textbooks at age 12 in her family's cramped apartment above her father's auto repair shop in East Los Angeles. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Vasquez, had worked double shifts for 20 years to pay for her education, believing with immigrant determination that their daughter's brilliant mind could achieve anything in America. Now, at 34, with a PhD from MIT and a reputation as one of the most innovative theoretical physicists in the country, Elena was about to discover that intelligence meant nothing when you'd accidentally invited interdimensional monsters to Earth. The interdimensional entity tilted its elongated head as it studied her, and Elena felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. This creature wasn't here by accident. It had been monitoring human dimensional research, waiting for someone to develop technology advanced enough to pierce the barriers between realities. Her particle accelerator, designed to test theories about quantum tunneling and parallel universe communication, had instead created a highway for beings that viewed humanity as nothing more than an obstacle to interdimensional conquest. Dr. Vasquez, we're reading massive energy fluctuations from your lab. The voice of Dr. James Morrison, the facility director, crackled through her radio with barely controlled panic. Whatever you're doing in there, shut it down immediately. We've got electromagnetic pulses cascading across the entire eastern seaboard, and the Pentagon is already demanding answers about why our satellites just went dark over a 50-mile radius. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency shutdown controls, but the interdimensional being raised what might have been a hand if hands were made of shifting geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The gesture, somehow, communicated a universal message. Don't even think about it. The portal behind the creature rippled and expanded, revealing more figures moving in the impossible space beyond. Elena realized with mounting horror that she wasn't dealing with a single lost traveler from another dimension. She was looking at the advanced scout of an invasion force. The facility's emergency klaxons began wailing as Elena's computer screens flickered with readings that defied comprehension. The quantum field she generated wasn't just stable, it was growing stronger, feeding on the interaction between dimensions like a fire-consuming oxygen. Through the expanding portal, she could see what looked like a massive staging area filled with beings whose forms shifted and changed, as if the very concept of fixed physical existence was foreign to them. These weren't refugees fleeing a dying dimension. They were conquerors who had found their next target. Elena's radio crackled again, this time with a voice she didn't recognize. "Dr. Vasquez, this is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We're establishing a containment perimeter around your facility. Under no circumstances are you to leave that laboratory until we understand what we're dealing with. The President has been briefed, and as of this moment, your experiment is classified at the highest levels of national security. The interdimensional creature seemed to smile, though its face had no mouth. Elena simply felt the malevolent amusement radiating from its alien consciousness. It gestured toward the portal, and she heard sounds that made her blood freeze. The organized movement of what could only be an army, marching rhythms that didn't quite match any terrestrial military cadence, command voices speaking in frequencies that bypassed her ears and resonated directly in her bones, and underneath it all, a low harmonic hum that felt like the universe itself preparing for war. Elena backed toward her emergency communication system, her mind racing through everything she knew about dimensional physics and quantum field collapse. If she could reverse the polarity of the particle accelerator and generate an inverse quantum wave, there might be a chance to destabilize the portal before. The creature moved faster than thought, crossing the laboratory in what seemed like a single step. Elena found herself pressed against the concrete wall, staring into eyes that showed her reflections of herself from dimensions where she'd made different choices. In one reflection, she saw herself as a child who'd never learned to read. Another, she was an old woman dying alone. But in the clearest reflection, she saw herself standing in this exact spot, making the choice that would determine whether humanity survived the next 72 hours. "Dr. Vasquez, we're detecting additional energy signatures appearing across the globe." Colonel Mitchell's voice carried a new note of desperation. Similar readings just appeared at CERN in Switzerland, the Japanese KK laboratory, and 3 other particle physics facilities worldwide. Whatever you've done, it's spreading to every major quantum research site on Earth. Eleanor's blood turned to ice as she realized the full scope of her mistake. The interdimensional beings hadn't been waiting for her specifically. They'd been monitoring every facility on Earth capable of advanced quantum manipulation, ready to exploit any breakthrough that could give them access to this dimension. Her experiment had been the key that unlocked the door, but now that door was being systematically opened at every major research facility across the planet. The invasion she'd accidentally triggered wasn't limited to one laboratory in New York. It was a coordinated assault on human civilization itself. The creature stepped back and gestured toward the portal again, and this time Elena could see what was truly waiting on the other side. Not just an army, but an entire civilization of beings whose technology made humanity's greatest achievements look like stone tools. Floating cities that defied gravity, weapons that seemed to bend space itself, and worst of all, massive machines that looked designed for one purpose, stripping the dimensional barriers away from conquered realities until they could harvest whatever energy sources they needed from the collapse of entire universes. Elena's hands found her father's cross hanging around her neck, the one gift he'd given her when she left for college, blessed by the priest at their neighborhood church in East L.A. "Mija," he'd said in his careful English mixed with the Spanish of his childhood, "no matter how smart you get, remember that some things are bigger than what any one person can understand. But sometimes God puts the right person in the right place to do what needs to be done." The interdimensional creature's attention shifted as new sounds emerged from the portal, sounds of machinery powering up for what could only be a full-scale, interdimensional assault. Elena realized that whatever these beings were planning, it would begin soon, and her accidental breakthrough had given them everything they needed to destroy not just Earth, but every parallel version of Earth across infinite dimensions. The weight of countless realities now rested on the shoulders of a woman whose only weapons were her brilliant mind and the stubborn determination her parents had instilled in her during 20 years of struggle in immigrant America. As the portal expanded to twice its original size, Elena made a choice that would echo across every possible timeline. Instead of trying to shut down her experiment, she was going to find a way to turn humanity's greatest mistake into its last, best hope for survival. 12 hours later, Elena stood in a hastily assembled command center inside Brookhaven National Laboratory, surrounded by military officials whose faces carried the grim expression of people trying to solve an impossible problem. The facility had been locked down under martial law, with a 5-mile exclusion zone patrolled by soldiers who'd been told they were containing a dimensional breach incident, terminology that sounded official enough to prevent panic while keeping the full truth classified at the highest levels of government. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a career military engineer with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many classified disasters, spread a series of photographs across the conference table with the methodical precision of someone delivering a death sentence. These images were taken at the other affected facilities over the past 8 hours. Geneva, Tokyo, Beijing, and Moscow are all reporting identical phenomena. The portals aren't random, they're coordinated, and they're growing stronger every hour. Elena studied the photographs with the analytical mind that had earned her 3 degrees and a reputation as one of America's most innovative physicists. But even her scientific training couldn't fully process what she was seeing. Each facility showed the same impossible sight, tears in reality itself, revealing glimpses of a dimension that operated by different laws of physics. But more terrifying than the portals themselves were the beings emerging from them. Creatures that seemed designed for conquest, carrying weapons that bent light around them and moved with the coordinated efficiency of a force that had done this before. The entities show clear signs of advanced intelligence and military organization, reported Dr. Amanda Chen, the MIT physicist who'd been rushed to Brookhaven when news of Elena's breakthrough reached the Pentagon. They're not randomly exploring our dimension. They're establishing strategic positions at every major population center within 50 miles of each portal site. This has all the hallmarks of a planned invasion, using our own scientific infrastructure as entry points. General Robert Hayes, a decorated veteran whose uniform displayed ribbons from conflicts across 3 decades of American military history, leaned forward with the weary expression of a man who'd spent his career preparing for every possible threat to national security, except this one. "Dr. Vasquez, we need to know if there's any way to reverse this process. The Joint Chiefs have been briefed, allies are demanding answers, and frankly, conventional military responses seem inadequate against beings that can apparently ignore several fundamental laws of physics." Eleanor's laptop displayed streams of data from her quantum field generators, readings that painted a picture of escalating catastrophe with mathematical precision. The interdimensional breach wasn't just stable, it was actively feeding on the Interaction between realities, growing stronger as more energy from parallel dimensions poured into their universe. Her calculations showed that at the current rate of expansion, the barriers between dimensions would collapse entirely within 72 hours, creating a cascade effect that would destroy every parallel version of Earth across infinite realities. General, the situation is worse than we initially believed, Elena said, her voice carrying the steady calm she'd learned during years of presenting controversial research to skeptical academic committees. The beings we're dealing with appear to be what I can only describe as interdimensional harvester entities. They don't want to conquer our specific reality. They want to collapse all dimensional barriers so they can extract energy from the destruction of entire universe clusters. The silence that followed her explanation was broken only by the distant hum of military helicopters circling the facility and the steady beeping of monitoring equipment tracking radiation levels that shouldn't have been possible outside a nuclear reactor core. Through the reinforced windows, Eleanor could see soldiers establishing defensive positions against an enemy that could potentially step through walls as if they didn't exist. Colonel Mitchell's radio crackled with reports from the global monitoring network that had been established to track the expanding crisis. Command, we're receiving confirmation that portal activity has increased by 300% at all affected sites in the past 4 hours. The entities are bringing through larger machines now, devices we can't identify but that appear to be scanning local population centers for some unknown purpose. Elena felt the weight of her parents' expectations settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden she'd carried since childhood. Maria and Carlos Vasquez had sacrificed everything to give their daughter opportunities they'd never had, working 16-hour days in factories and service jobs, saving every possible dollar for her education, believing with absolute faith that their brilliant child would one day do something that mattered. Now facing the literal end of all known reality, Elena realized that her parents' faith might have prepared her for this moment better than all her advanced degrees combined. There might be a solution, Elena said, pulling up a theoretical framework she'd developed during her graduate studies, but had never dared to test. If I can modify the quantum field generators to create what's essentially an interdimensional firewall, a barrier that prevents energy transfer between realities, we might be able to force the portals to collapse. But it would require me to physically enter the interdimensional space to plant quantum stabilizers at precise locations within their staging area. Dr. Chen's face paled as she grasped the implications of Elena's proposal. You're talking about traveling to another dimension where the basic laws of physics may not apply, infiltrating what appears to be a hostile military staging area, and somehow deploying technology that's never been tested against beings whose capabilities we don't understand. The survival odds would be essentially zero. General Hayes studied Elena with the calculating gaze of a commander, evaluating whether a desperate mission had any chance of success. Dr. Vasquez, are you telling me that the only way to prevent the destruction of every parallel universe is for you to personally carry out a suicide mission in a dimension we know nothing about, against an enemy force that has technology decades ahead of our own? Elena's hand unconsciously moved to her father's cross again, and she thought about the story Carlos used to tell her about her grandfather, who'd fought in the Revolution of 1910 alongside men who knew they were probably going to die but believed that some causes were worth any sacrifice. Her grandfather had been a simple farmer who couldn't read or write, but when foreign interests threatened to destroy the Mexico he loved, he'd picked up a rifle and joined forces with people who shared his determination to protect what mattered most. General, my grandfather once told my father that a person's worth isn't measured by what they can do when things are easy. It's measured by what they're willing to do when everything they love is at stake. Elena said, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who'd made an irreversible decision. These beings chose to use our own scientific achievements against us because they thought we were too divided and too afraid to fight back effectively. They're about to discover that they seriously underestimated what Americans are willing to do when our families are threatened. The interdimensional creatures had made a critical error in their assessment of human nature. They'd analyzed Earth's military capabilities, technological infrastructure, and political divisions, but they'd failed to account for the most dangerous. A force in the universe, a brilliant woman whose immigrant parents had taught her that some fights are worth everything, and who had just realized that she possessed the only combination of knowledge, skills, and sheer stubborn determination needed to turn an interdimensional invasion into the greatest mistake their species had ever made. As alarms began sounding throughout the facility, indicating that the portal in Elena's laboratory was expanding, again she knew that her 72 hours had officially begun. The interdimensional war for the survival of every possible reality was about to be fought by a physicist from East Los Angeles whose only advantages were 15 years of quantum research experience and the unshakable belief that sometimes one person really could change everything. The portal had tripled in size by the time Elena returned to her laboratory, now accompanied by a team of military engineers who were frantically installing equipment designed to monitor interdimensional energy fluctuations. The air itself seemed to vibrate with otherworldly harmonics as more beings emerged from the tear in reality, each one carrying devices that defied human understanding of technology and physics. Captain Marcus Torres, a bomb disposal specialist whose steady hands had diffused improvised explosive devices across 2 tours in Afghanistan, watched the interdimensional entities with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to identify threats that could kill him instantly. Dr. Vasquez, I've seen a lot of weird stuff in 15 years of military service, but these things move like they're following a tactical manual we've never read. They're not just invading, they're establishing a permanent foothold. Elena's modified quantum field generators hummed with power as she calibrated the equipment she'd need for her interdimensional mission, each adjustment requiring calculations that pushed the boundaries of theoretical physics into territory no human had ever explored. The mathematics alone was staggering. She was essentially planning to navigate between parallel universes while carrying technology designed to collapse quantum tunnels from inside a hostile dimension where the basic constants of reality might not apply. Through the expanded portal, Eleanor could see the interdimensional being's staging area more clearly now, a vast complex of floating platforms and crystalline structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The architecture followed geometric principles that hurt to look at directly, as if the buildings themselves were designed by minds that didn't think in 3-dimensional terms. But what caught Elena's attention were the massive machines positioned at regular intervals throughout the complex. Devices that were clearly designed to extract some form of energy from dimensional collapse events. Dr. Vasquez, we've established contact with the other affected facilities, Colonel Mitchell announced as she entered the laboratory, carrying a secure communication device. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. Beijing reports that the entities there have begun some form of large-scale construction project. Moscow's portal is emitting radiation signatures that are affecting weather patterns across Eastern Europe. And Geneva, she paused, her expression grim. Geneva has gone completely dark, no communications in or out for the past 2 hours. Elena felt her chest tighten as she grasped the full implications of what Colonel Mitchell was reporting. The interdimensional beings weren't just invading Earth. They were terraforming it, reshaping the fundamental structure of reality itself to suit their needs. Each portal was essentially a foothold that allowed them to extend their influence into this dimension, gradually converting human space into something that would eventually be indistinguishable from their own reality. The laboratory's door burst open as Dr. James Morrison, the facility director, entered with the expression of barely controlled panic. "Elena, I've just gotten off the phone with the Secretary of Defense. The President is considering nuclear strikes against all portal sites if we can't find another solution within the next 24 hours. The Joint Chiefs believe that complete sterilization might be the only way to prevent global contamination." Elena's mind raced as she considered the catastrophic implications of using nuclear weapons against interdimensional portals. The quantum energy released by atomic detonation would likely destabilize the barriers between realities even further, potentially opening permanent rifts that would make the current situation look like a minor inconvenience. Instead of stopping the invasion, nuclear strikes would probably accelerate the dimensional collapse and guarantee the destruction of every parallel universe. "Dr. Morrison, nuclear weapons would be worse than useless," Elena said, pulling up. "Computer simulations that showed the quantum cascade effects of atomic detonation near dimensional portals. The energy release would create feedback loops that could tear holes in space-time itself. Instead of closing the portals, we'd be creating permanent dimensional rifts that no known technology could ever repair. We'd essentially be handing these beings exactly what they want: complete dimensional collapse." Captain Torres, who'd been quietly studying the interdimensional entities through high-powered telescopic equipment, suddenly straightened with the alert posture of someone who'd spotted immediate danger. "Dr. Vasquez, we've got movement in the portal. Something big is coming through, bigger than anything we've seen so far." Elena turned toward the portal, just as a massive structure began emerging from the interdimensional space. A crystalline construct the size of a city bus that pulsed with energy patterns that made her quantum field generators look like flashlights by comparison. The structure moved with fluid grace despite its enormous size, positioning itself at the center of the staging area like a command center or communications hub for the invasion force. Through her modified sensors, Elena could detect that the massive crystalline structure was actively scanning Earth's electromagnetic spectrum, analyzing everything from radio transmissions to internet traffic, with processing power that dwarfed humanity's most advanced supercomputers. The beings weren't just planning to invade. They were studying human civilization in real time, learning about infrastructure, population distribution, and military capabilities with the thoroughness of scientists preparing a detailed research paper. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez at Brookhaven." She spoke into Colonel Mitchell's secure radio, addressing whatever command authority was monitoring their situation. "The entities are conducting comprehensive intelligence gathering on human civilization. They're not acting impulsively. This is a methodical conquest that's been planned down to the smallest detail. If we're going to stop them, we need to move now, before they finish their analysis of our defensive capabilities." The massive crystalline structure began emitting a low-frequency pulse that Elena's instruments detected across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The pulse seemed to be some form of interdimensional communication system, likely coordinating with similar structures at the other portal sites worldwide. Elena realized with growing horror that the invasion force was essentially turning Earth's own scientific infrastructure into a planetary communication network for coordinating humanity's destruction. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "Mia, we're watching the news about some kind of emergency at your work. Your father and I are praying for you. Remember what we taught you about fighting for what matters. Te amo." The message was followed by a photo from her childhood, Elena at age 8, standing proudly beside a science fair project about parallel universes, while her parents beamed with pride behind her. That photo crystallized everything Elena was fighting for. Not just the abstract concept of saving humanity, but the specific reality of protecting people like Maria and Carlos Vasquez. hard-working Americans who'd built a life based on the belief that tomorrow would be better than today, who'd sacrificed everything to give their daughter opportunities they'd never had, who deserved to live in a world where scientific progress made life better instead of opening doorways for interdimensional conquest. Elena made a decision that would have seemed impossible 12 hours earlier. She was going to enter the interdimensional staging area, plant quantum stabilizers at strategic locations throughout the enemy complex, and collapse every portal on Earth simultaneously, even if it meant being trapped in an alien dimension when the barriers sealed forever. Some fights were worth everything, and this was the fight her entire life had been preparing her for. As she began the final calibrations on her interdimensional navigation equipment, Elena knew that she was about to become either humanity's greatest hero or its most spectacular failure. But for the first time since the portal opened, she felt the calm certainty of someone who'd found their purpose. She was Carlos and Maria Vasquez's daughter. She was a brilliant physicist who understood quantum mechanics better than almost anyone. Alive, and she was an American who'd been raised to believe that one person with enough determination could change the world. The interdimensional war for the survival of every possible reality was about to begin, and Elena Vasquez was ready to fight. Elena's interdimensional suit looked like something from a science fiction movie, but every component had been hastily assembled from cutting-edge technology that existed nowhere else on Earth. The quantum field generator backpack weighed 47 pounds and contained enough exotic matter to power a small city, while the dimensional stability sensors woven into the fabric could theoretically allow her to navigate between parallel realities without losing track of her original timeline. Master Sergeant Rebecca Stone, a Special Forces veteran whose mechanical engineering expertise had been crucial in assembling Elena's equipment, performed final safety checks with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen too many good people die from equipment failures. Dr. Vasquez, this gear is completely untested under the conditions you're about to face. We don't know how your equipment will interact with whatever physics rules apply in their dimension. You could materialize inside solid matter, or the quantum. Stabilizers could overload and kill you instantly. Elena adjusted the communication device that would allow her to maintain contact with the command center, knowing that the technology was based on quantum entanglement principles that should work across dimensional boundaries, assuming the fundamental constants of physics remained consistent in interdimensional space. The entire plan depended on theories she'd developed during graduate school, but had never imagined testing under life-or-death circumstances against hostile alien forces. Through the laboratory windows, Elena could see the growing military presence surrounding Brookhaven as the government mobilized every available resource to contain what was being classified as the greatest threat to national security in American history. Apache helicopters patrolled the airspace while armored vehicles established defensive perimeters, but everyone involved understood that conventional military force would be useless against beings who could apparently ignore fundamental laws of physics. Elena, I've just received intelligence reports from the other portal sites, Colonel Mitchell announced, as she entered the laboratory carrying classified documents that painted an increasingly desperate picture. The entities at CERN have begun construction of what appears to be a massive interdimensional gateway, something large enough to allow structures the size of aircraft carriers to pass through. Moscow's portal is generating electromagnetic pulses that have disabled electronics across half of Western Russia. We're running out of time. Elena's parents had called 3 times in the past hour, their voices carrying the controlled worry of people who understood that their daughter was involved in something dangerous, but had no idea that she was literally preparing to save every possible version of reality. Elena had told them she was working on a classified project that would help protect America, which was technically true, even if it didn't begin to capture the cosmic scope of what she was attempting. The interdimensional beings in the staging area had noticed Elena's preparations, their attention focusing on her with the calculating interest of predators who'd spotted potential prey. Through her enhanced sensors, Elena could detect that they were analyzing her equipment, likely trying to understand how human technology might pose a threat to their invasion plans. The fact that they were taking her seriously enough to study her preparations was both encouraging and terrifying. It meant her plan might actually work, but it also meant they would be ready for her. Dr. Amanda Chen had spent the past 6 hours running quantum field simulations to identify the optimal placement points for Elena's stabilizers, locations within the interdimensional staging area where simultaneous detonation would create cascade failures throughout their entire portal network. The mathematics required to calculate interdimensional weak points had pushed several of Brookhaven's most advanced computers beyond their operational limits, but the results showed a clear pattern. Elena would need to place stabilizers at 7 specific locations within the enemy complex, all within a 12-minute window. Dr. Vasquez, according to our analysis, you'll have exactly 11 minutes and 43 seconds to reach all 7 placement points after you enter their dimension, Dr. Chen explained, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the interdimensional staging area that looked like something from a nightmare architecture textbook. The quantum stabilizers need to be activated simultaneously to create a resonance cascade that will collapse all dimensional barriers at once. If even one placement fails, or if the timing is off by more than 30 seconds, the cascade effect won't achieve critical mass. Elena studied the tactical map with the focused intensity she'd once brought to solving theoretical physics problems that her professors had considered impossible. But this wasn't a graduate school challenge. This was a military operation where failure meant the destruction of every parallel universe, and where her only backup plan was the hope that someone else would think of something better before the 72-hour deadline expired. Captain Torres, who'd volunteered to provide tactical support despite having no experience with interdimensional warfare, reviewed Elena's mission profile with the analytical mindset of someone who'd spent years identifying the most efficient ways to neutralize explosive threats. "Ma'am, this operation assumes you'll be able to move through their staging area without being detected or intercepted. These beings have shown clear signs of advanced intelligence and military organization. They're going to have security measures we can't predict." Eleanor's radio crackled with reports from the global monitoring network tracking portal activity across all affected sites. The interdimensional entities were accelerating their operations, bringing through larger machines and more personnel, as if they were preparing for some kind of final phase of their invasion plan. Whatever their ultimate objective, it was becoming clear that humanity's window for effective resistance was closing rapidly. The massive crystalline structure at the center of the staging area began emitting new frequency patterns that Elena's instruments detected as some form of interdimensional communication protocol. Through quantum field analysis, she could determine that the structure was coordinating with similar devices at portal sites worldwide, synchronizing what appeared to be a countdown sequence that would culminate in approximately 68 hours. Elena realized that her 72-hour deadline wasn't arbitrary. It was based on the interdimensional being's own operational timeline. They had planned their invasion to conclude within 3 days of initial portal opening, suggesting that their technology required specific temporal parameters to achieve whatever dimensional manipulation they were attempting. If Elena could disrupt their synchronized operations, she might be able to buy humanity additional time to develop alternative countermeasures. "Command, this is Dr. Vasquez." Elena spoke into her secure communication system, addressing whatever military and scientific leadership was monitoring her mission. I'm detecting coordinated countdown sequences at all portal sites. The entities appear to be operating under a strict timeline that culminates in approximately 68 hours. This gives us a tactical advantage if I can force them to accelerate or delay their operations. I might be able to disrupt their synchronization and create opportunities for additional intervention. Master Sergeant Stone completed her final equipment check and stepped back with the satisfied expression of someone who'd done everything possible to prepare for an impossible mission. Dr. Vasquez, your gear is as ready as we can make it under these circumstances. The quantum stabilizers are armed and programmed with Dr. Chen's targeting coordinates. Your communication system should maintain contact across dimensional boundaries. And your emergency extraction protocol, she paused. Well, let's hope you don't need it. Elena picked up her father's cross and fastened it securely inside her interdimensional suit, next to her heart, where she could feel its familiar weight. During whatever ordeal waited in the alien staging area, Carlos Vasquez had given her that cross when she left for college, telling her that no matter how far her education took her from the neighborhood where she'd grown up, she should remember that she was fighting for people who might never understand the science behind her work, but who deserved to live in a world where smart people used their gifts to protect what mattered most. As Elena approached the portal for her interdimensional mission, she knew that she was carrying the hopes of every parallel version of humanity across infinite realities. But more than that, she was carrying the specific hope of her parents, who'd sacrificed everything to give their daughter the education and opportunity she needed to become the person who could save the world when it needed saving most. The interdimensional war for the survival of every possible timeline was about to become very personal for the entities who'd made the mistake of threatening Elena Vasquez's family. Elena stepped through the portal at exactly 0347 hours, emerging into an interdimensional space where the laws of physics operated according to principles that made her advanced education feel like elementary school preparation for cosmic calculus. The staging area stretched beyond the horizon, in directions that shouldn't have been possible, filled with architectural structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, while somehow maintaining structural integrity. The first thing Elena noticed was the sound, or rather the absence of sound as humans understood it. The interdimensional space transmitted vibrations directly through quantum field fluctuations, creating a form of communication that bypassed her ears entirely and resonated in the electromagnetic patterns of her brain tissue. The beings around her were essentially thinking at each other in languages that existed as pure mathematical concepts rather than spoken words. Elena's quantum field sensors immediately detected the presence of at least 47 interdimensional entities within the staging area, each one carrying what her instruments identified as weaponry, based on principles of space-time manipulation rather than traditional ballistic force. If these beings decided to eliminate her, they could presumably edit her existence out of reality itself, rather than simply killing her in conventional terms. The interdimensional staging area was organized with the efficiency of beings who'd conducted similar operations across multiple conquered realities. Floating platforms served as transportation networks between massive crystalline structures that pulsed with energy signatures Elena's instruments could barely analyze. Everything was designed for rapid deployment and systematic resource extraction, suggesting that these beings had perfected the art of interdimensional conquest through extensive practice. Elena's first objective was a quantum resonance hub located approximately 800 meters from her entry point, positioned at the center of what appeared to be the staging area's primary power distribution network. Her instruments indicated that the hub controlled energy flow to all secondary systems throughout the complex, making it an ideal placement point for her first quantum stabilizer. Moving through the interdimensional space required Elena to recalibrate her understanding of navigation and physics on a moment-by-moment basis. Distances seemed to shift based on her intentions rather than following consistent geometric principles, and the platforms she walked on occasionally existed in multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Elena found herself drawing on meditation techniques her father had taught her during childhood, maintaining focus through pure mental discipline while her scientific training struggled to process sensory input that defied rational analysis. Interdimensional beings noticed her presence but didn't immediately move to intercept her, apparently more curious than threatened by the arrival of a single human carrying primitive technology. Elena realized that their lack of aggressive response might be tactical rather than dismissive. They were allowing her to proceed deeper into their staging area so they could study her capabilities and objectives before deciding how to respond. To her intrusion, Elena's communication system maintained contact with the command center at Brookhaven, but the signals were increasingly distorted by the quantum field fluctuations of interdimensional space. Colonel Mitchell's voice crackled through with reports of accelerating portal activity at all affected sites worldwide. Dr. Vasquez, Beijing is reporting massive energy buildups at their portal site. Moscow has gone completely silent. We need you to accelerate your timeline. We might not have 68 hours. The first quantum resonance hub was protected by security systems that operated according to principles Elena had never encountered in 15 years of advanced physics research. Rather than conventional barriers or electronic countermeasures, the hub was surrounded by fields that seemed to exist in probabilistic states, making it difficult for Elena to determine whether she was approaching solid matter or empty space. Until she actually made contact, Elena deployed her first quantum stabilizer using techniques that felt like performing surgery on reality itself. The device needed to be integrated into the quantum resonance hub's primary energy matrix without triggering security responses that might alert the interdimensional beings to her sabotage mission. Elena's hands moved with steady precision as she made modifications that required her to calculate quantum field interactions in real time while operating in a dimension where the fundamental constants of physics kept shifting. The stabilizer, activated successfully, beginning a countdown sequence that would culminate in dimensional barrier collapse once all 7 devices were deployed and synchronized. Elena felt a moment of satisfaction that was immediately overshadowed by the realization that 6 more placements lay ahead, each one likely more difficult and dangerous than the last. Elena's progress toward the second objective was interrupted by the approach of 3 interdimensional entities whose forms seemed designed specifically for what Elena could only classify as interdimensional law enforcement. These beings moved with purposeful intent rather than casual observation, and Elena's senses detected that they were armed with devices capable of manipulating the quantum fields that kept her dimensional suit stable. Elena's training in crisis management, developed during years of presenting controversial research to hostile academic review boards, served her well as she faced beings whose technology could potentially unweave her existence from the fabric of reality itself. Instead of panicking, Elena activated her suit's stealth protocols and moved toward a cluster of floating platforms that would provide cover while she planned her approach to the second quantum resonance hub. The interdimensional law enforcement entities spread out in a search pattern that demonstrated clear tactical sophistication, using scanning devices that analyzed quantum signatures rather than relying on visual detection. Elena realized that her interdimensional suit was essentially invisible to beings who perceived reality through electromagnetic spectrum analysis. but completely obvious to entities who could directly observe quantum field fluctuations. Elena's second objective required her to navigate through what appeared to be the staging area's primary construction zone, where massive machines were assembling structures that defied three-dimensional geometric principles. The equipment being constructed looked designed for planetary-scale resource extraction, confirming Elena's worst fears about the interdimensional being's ultimate intentions for Earth and every parallel version of Earth across infinite realities. The quantum resonance hub controlling the construction zone was protected by more sophisticated security measures than the first location, including automated systems that seemed capable of analyzing intruder intentions and responding with appropriate countermeasures. Elena approached the hub using a combination of quantum field manipulation and pure stealth, drawing on techniques she'd developed during graduate school for conducting experiments in electromagnetically sensitive environments. Elena's second quantum stabilizer deployed successfully, but the activation triggered security responses throughout the staging area that indicated her sabotage mission had been discovered. Alert frequencies cascaded through the interdimensional communication networks as the beings realized that the primitive human technology they'd been monitoring was actually capable of threatening their invasion infrastructure. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of interdimensional entities converged on Elena's location while security systems activated throughout the staging area, creating energy barriers that would prevent her from reaching the remaining quantum resonance hubs. Through conventional navigation, Elena found herself in the position of David facing Goliath, armed with quantum physics knowledge and stubborn determination against beings whose technology made humanity's greatest achievements look like stone tools. Elena's communication system crackled with increasingly desperate reports from the global monitoring network. Dr. Vasquez, portal activity has accelerated dramatically at all sites. The entities are bringing through equipment we've never seen before, devices that appear to be designed for large-scale dimensional manipulation. Whatever they're planning, it's happening ahead of schedule. The interdimensional beings had underestimated Elena's capabilities, but they were learning fast. Elena could see them analyzing her quantum stabilizers, likely attempting to develop countermeasures that would prevent her from completing her sabotage mission. She had perhaps 15 minutes before their superior technology overcame her temporary advantages, which meant she needed to reach 5 more placement points while evading an entire civilization of beings whose understanding of physics transcended anything humans had ever achieved. Elena activated her suit's emergency protocols and began moving toward the third quantum resonance hub with the desperate urgency of someone who understood that failure wasn't just personal death. It was the destruction of every possible timeline where humanity had ever existed or might ever exist. Elena's quantum field generators were operating at 97% capacity as she approached the third quantum resonance hub. Her equipment pushed to the absolute limits of human technology, while interdimensional security forces converged on her position from multiple directions. The beings hunting her moved through the staging area with fluid efficiency, their forms shifting between dimensional planes in ways that made conventional evasion tactics useless. The third hub was located at the center of what Elena's instruments identified as the staging area's primary communication array, a massive crystalline structure that coordinated portal operations across all affected sites worldwide. If Elena could successfully deploy her quantum stabilizer here, the resulting cascade failure would disrupt the interdimensional being's ability to synchronize their invasion timeline, potentially buying humanity crucial additional time to develop. Alternative countermeasures. Elena's approach to the communication array required her to navigate through a maze of energy fields that existed in probabilistic states, making each step a calculated risk that could result in either successful infiltration or immediate detection by security systems designed to protect the most critical infrastructure in the entire staging area. Her quantum field sensors indicated that the array was defended by automated systems capable of responding to threats faster than human reflexes could react. The communication hub's security measures included devices that Elena could only describe as quantum mines, explosive systems that would detonate if her dimensional suit's energy signature triggered their proximity sensors. Elena found herself essentially playing three-dimensional chess, with physics itself calculating quantum field interactions while moving through an environment where the wrong step could result in her being scattered across multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, Elena's third quantum stabilizer required 15 minutes of precise calibration to integrate properly with the communication array's quantum matrix, during which time she would be completely vulnerable to interdimensional security forces that were systematically searching the entire staging area. Elena's hands moved with steady precision as she performed modifications that felt like performing surgery on the fundamental structure of reality itself, while her sensors detected the approaching signatures of at least 12 entities armed with spacetime manipulation weapons. The stabilizer activated just as the first interdimensional security team reached Elena's position, beginning a countdown sequence that would contribute to dimensional barrier collapse once all 7 devices achieved synchronized detonation. Elena felt a moment of fierce satisfaction that was immediately overshadowed by the realization that she was now surrounded by beings whose weapons could edit her existence out of the timeline altogether. Elena's escape from the communication array required her to use techniques that pushed her interdimensional suit beyond its designed operational parameters, essentially overclocking her quantum field generators to achieve temporary invisibility across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The strain on her equipment was enormous, but Elena managed to evade immediate capture and begin moving toward the 4th quantum resonance hub, while interdimensional security forces struggled to track her position. The 4th hub controlled the staging area's dimensional anchor systems, technology that kept the entire complex stable within interdimensional space, rather than drifting between parallel realities. Elena realized that this hub represented the most critical target of her entire mission, because destroying the dimensional anchors would force the staging area to collapse into chaotic dimensional drift, making coordinated invasion operations impossible. Elena's approach to the dimensional anchor hub was complicated by the discovery that the interdimensional beings had activated emergency protocols throughout their staging area, essentially converting their entire complex into a fortress. Designed to prevent further sabotage, energy barriers now protected every critical system, while security patrols had tripled in both number and sophistication. The 4th quantum stabilizer required Elena to access the dimensional anchor hub's core systems, which meant penetrating security measures that included quantum encryption protocols beyond anything humans had ever developed. Elena found herself essentially hacking reality itself, using her understanding of quantum field mechanics to bypass security systems designed by beings whose technology transcended human comprehension. Elena's success in deploying the 4th stabilizer triggered massive security responses throughout the staging area as the interdimensional beings realized that their invasion infrastructure was being systematically compromised by technology they'd underestimated. Alert frequencies cascaded through every communication system, while automated security measures activated throughout the complex, turning the entire staging area into an active war zone. Elena's communication system maintained intermittent contact with Brookhaven despite increasing interference from the staging area's security countermeasures. Colonel Mitchell's voice carried barely controlled desperation as she reported accelerating crisis conditions at portal sites worldwide. Dr. Vasquez, we're detecting massive energy buildups at all affected facilities. The entities appear to be preparing for immediate full-scale invasion deployment. Whatever you're doing, it's working. They're panicking. Eleanor realized that her sabotage mission had forced the interdimensional beings to abandon their carefully planned timeline and begin emergency deployment of invasion forces before their infrastructure was fully prepared. Instead of the coordinated conquest they'd originally planned, they were now rushing to establish footholds on Earth before Elena could complete her mission and collapse their entire portal network. The change in enemy tactics created both opportunities and dangers for Elena's mission. The interdimensional beings were making mistakes due to their accelerated timeline, but they were also bringing through military equipment designed for immediate combat operations rather than the scientific infrastructure they'd been deploying. During their methodical phase, Elena moved toward the fifth quantum resonance hub with the grim determination of someone who understood that she was probably going to die in the next few minutes, but was absolutely committed to taking the interdimensional invasion force down with her. 3 more stabilizers needed to be deployed within the next 8 minutes, or the cascade effect wouldn't achieve critical mass and the portal network would remain operational. The interdimensional beings had underestimated the stubborn determination of a brilliant physicist whose immigrant parents had taught her that some fights were worth everything, and who had just realized that she was the only person in any reality who could prevent the destruction of every possible timeline where humanity had ever existed. The war for infinite realities was about to reach its climax, and Elena Vasquez was ready to sacrifice everything to ensure that Earth's children would have a future worth fighting for. Elena's quantum field generators were operating at 112% capacity, far beyond their designed safety limits, as she approached the fifth quantum resonance hub through a staging area that had transformed into an active battlefield. Interdimensional security forces were converging on her position from every direction, while automated defense systems filled the air with energy discharges that could unweave matter at the subatomic level. The fifth hub controlled the staging area's reality stabilization matrix, the technology that prevented the entire complex from phase shifting between dimensional planes and losing cohesion across parallel realities. Elena realized that this hub represented the linchpin of the entire interdimensional invasion infrastructure, because without reality stabilization, the beings couldn't maintain their foothold in human dimensional space long enough to complete their conquest operations. Eleanor's approach to the reality stabilization hub required her to navigate through what could only be described as a 3-dimensional minefield of quantum anomalies, where each step risked triggering security responses that would alert every entity in the staging area to her exact location. Her quantum field sensors were detecting energy signatures that pushed her instruments beyond their analytical capabilities, indicating that she was approaching technology designed by beings whose understanding of physics transcended anything humans could comprehend. The interdimensional beings hunting Elena had adapted their tactics to account for her proven capabilities, deploying security teams armed with weapons specifically designed to counter human quantum field technology. Elena could detect that they were analyzing her equipment in real time, developing countermeasures that would soon make her interdimensional suit's stealth capabilities useless against their superior scanning technology. Elena's fifth quantum stabilizer required her to access the reality stabilization hub's core matrix, while surrounded by automated security systems that responded to quantum field fluctuations faster than human reflexes could react. Elena found herself essentially performing open-heart surgery on the fundamental structure of interdimensional space, while under fire from beings whose weapons could edit her existence out of every parallel timeline simultaneously. The stabilizer, deployed successfully just as interdimensional security forces breached Elena's position, beginning a countdown sequence that would contribute to cascade failure once all 7 devices achieved synchronized detonation. Elena felt the satisfaction of someone who just delivered a crippling blow to enemy infrastructure, immediately followed by the terrifying realization that she was now surrounded by beings whose technology made her most advanced equipment look like stone tools. Elena's escape from the reality stabilization hub required her to use emergency protocols that pushed her interdimensional suit beyond any reasonable operational parameters, essentially converting her quantum field generators into improvised weapons that created localized space-time distortions. The strain on her equipment was catastrophic, but Elena managed to create enough chaos to evade immediate capture while moving toward the 6th quantum resonance hub. The 6th hub controlled the staging area's dimensional gateway network, the technology that allowed the interdimensional beings to coordinate portal operations across multiple conquered realities simultaneously. Elena understood that destroying this hub would not only cripple their invasion of Earth, but would also cut off their access to whatever other worlds they'd already conquered across infinite parallel dimensions. Elena's approach to the dimensional gateway hub was complicated by the realization that the interdimensional beings had activated their ultimate security protocols, essentially converting their entire staging area into a fortress designed to protect their most critical infrastructure. At any cost, energy barriers now surrounded every major system, while security forces armed with reality manipulation weapons patrolled every possible approach route. The interdimensional beings had finally recognized Elena as an existential threat to their entire conquest operation, rather than a minor nuisance to be eliminated at their convenience. They were now deploying resources against her that they'd originally reserved for full-scale military opposition, indicating that one human physicist had somehow become the primary obstacle to their interdimensional empire's expansion. Elena's 6th quantum stabilizer required her to penetrate the dimensional gateway hub's quantum encryption matrix, which meant essentially solving mathematical problems that existed across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Elena found herself drawing on every aspect of her 15-year education in theoretical physics, combined with the stubborn determination her parents had instilled in her during 20 years of immigrant struggle in America. The stabilizer activated, despite overwhelming security countermeasures, beginning a countdown sequence that would contribute to dimensional barrier collapse once all 7 devices achieved synchronized detonation. Elena realized that she was now only one placement away from completing her mission and saving every possible timeline where humanity had ever existed, assuming she could survive long enough to reach the final quantum resonance hub. Elena's communication system maintained intermittent contact with Brookhaven through quantum field fluctuations that were being increasingly disrupted by the staging area's security countermeasures. Colonel Mitchell's voice carried desperate urgency as she reported conditions at portal sites worldwide. Dr. Vasquez, the entities are beginning full-scale invasion deployment at all affected facilities. Military forces at every site are reporting contact with beings using weapons that appear to manipulate space-time itself. Whatever you're doing, finish it now. Humanity is running out of time. Elena moved toward the 7th and final quantum resonance hub with the focused determination of someone who understood that she was probably going to die in the next few minutes, but was absolutely committed to ensuring that her death would save every possible version of Earth across infinite realities. The final hub controlled the staging area's primary power core, the technology that supplied energy to every system throughout the entire interdimensional invasion infrastructure. The seventh hub was protected by the most sophisticated security measures Elena had encountered in any reality, including automated systems that seemed capable of predicting her actions and responding with countermeasures before she could implement her strategies. Elena realized that she was essentially fighting a technological civilization that had mastered interdimensional warfare through extensive practice across multiple conquered realities. Elena's final quantum stabilizer required her to access the power core's primary energy matrix, while under direct assault from interdimensional security forces armed with weapons designed to delete targets from existence across all parallel timelines. Elena's hands moved with steady precision as she performed the most critical modifications of her entire mission, while her sensors detected that she was surrounded by beings whose technology could edit her out of reality itself. The final stabilizer, activated just as Elena's quantum field generators reached complete overload, beginning a synchronized countdown sequence that would cascade across all 7 devices and trigger dimensional barrier collapse throughout the entire portal network. Elena felt the fierce satisfaction of someone who'd just delivered a killing blow to forces that had threatened every possible timeline where humanity could exist. Elena's communication system crackled with reports from global monitoring networks tracking portal activity worldwide. Dr. Vasquez, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations at all portal sites. The dimensional barriers are beginning to destabilize. Whatever you've done, it's working. The portals are starting to collapse. Elena realized that she'd succeeded in her impossible mission to save every parallel version of humanity across infinite realities, but that her success would probably cost her life as the dimensional barriers collapsed around her. Elena found herself thinking about her parents, who'd sacrificed everything to give their daughter the education and opportunity she needed to become the person who could save the world when it needed saving most. As the staging area began collapsing around her due to dimensional barrier failure, Elena felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd lived up to her parents' faith and used her gifts to protect what mattered most. Carlos and Maria Vasquez had raised a daughter who could change the world, and she'd just proven them right by saving every possible world that had ever existed or ever could exist. The dimensional cascade began at exactly 0502 hours Eastern Standard Time, as Elena's 7 quantum stabilizers achieved synchronized detonation and triggered the collapse of interdimensional barriers across the entire portal network. From her position in the disintegrating staging area, Elena watched reality itself fold and collapse around her as space-time returned to its natural configuration, sealing the tiers between dimensions that had threatened to destroy every possible timeline where humanity existed. Elena's emergency extraction protocol activated in the final seconds before complete dimensional barrier collapse, her quantum field generators burning out completely as they transferred her consciousness back to her original timeline through a process that felt like being simultaneously born and dying across infinite parallel realities. Elena materialized in her laboratory at Brookhaven National Laboratory, with her interdimensional suit completely destroyed and her body pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance, but alive and victorious. The portal in Elena's laboratory collapsed with a sound like the universe sighing in relief, leaving behind only empty air where a tear in reality had once threatened to destroy every possible version of Earth. Dr. Amanda Chen's instruments confirmed that dimensional barriers had stabilized across all portal sites worldwide, with no remaining traces of interdimensional energy signatures that could indicate continued threat from the conquest entities. Colonel Mitchell's radio crackled with reports from global monitoring networks confirming that portal collapse had been successful. At every affected facility around the world, all sites reporting complete dimensional barrier restoration. Beijing, Moscow, Geneva, and Tokyo are all confirming zero residual interdimensional activity. Dr. Vasquez, you've done the impossible. You've saved not just our reality, but every parallel reality that could ever exist. Elena collapsed into her desk chair, her body exhausted from the physical and mental strain of conducting warfare across multiple dimensions while operating technology that pushed the boundaries of human scientific understanding. But even through her exhaustion, Elena felt the deep satisfaction of someone who'd lived up to every expectation her parents had ever held for their brilliant daughter's potential to change the world. The immediate aftermath of Elena's victory created ripple effects throughout the global scientific community as researchers began analyzing the implications of proven interdimensional travel and the existence of hostile entities capable of conquering parallel realities. Elena's breakthrough would fundamentally transform humanity's understanding of physics, cosmology, and our place in the infinite multiverse of possible timelines. Within hours of the portal collapse, Elena received phone calls from every major university, government agency, and scientific institution on Earth, all requesting her expertise in developing defenses against future interdimensional threats. Elena realized that her accidental discovery of portal technology would lead to an entirely new field of defensive physics designed to protect humanity from conquest by beings whose technology transcended anything humans had previously imagined possible. Elena's parents arrived at Brookhaven National Laboratory 12 hours after the crisis ended, having driven through the night from Los Angeles after learning that their daughter had been involved in what news reports were calling the greatest scientific breakthrough and security crisis in human history. Maria and Carlos Vasquez looked at their daughter with the same pride they'd shown when she graduated from MIT, understanding that Elena had somehow used her education to protect not just America, but every possible version of America across infinite realities. "Mija," Carlos said in his careful English mixed with the Spanish of his childhood, "we always knew that God had given you special gifts for a special purpose. We just never imagined that the purpose would be saving every possible world that could ever exist." Elena hugged her parents with the fierce gratitude of someone who understood that their sacrifices and faith had made it possible for her to become the person capable of fighting interdimensional conquest entities and winning. The President of the United States called Elena personally to thank her for saving not just American national security, but the security of every parallel version of America across infinite timelines. Elena found herself being offered research positions at every major institution on Earth, along with resources to develop defensive technologies that would protect humanity from future interdimensional threats that might emerge from parallel realities. Elena accepted a position directing the newly established Department of Interdimensional Defense, a classified government agency tasked with monitoring dimensional barriers and developing countermeasures against entities that might threaten Earth from parallel realities. Elena's first initiative was establishing quantum monitoring stations at every major physics research facility worldwide, creating an early warning system that would detect dimensional intrusions before they could establish invasion footholds. The Interdimensional Defense Network became a symbol of international cooperation as countries worldwide contributed resources to protect not just their own timelines, but every possible timeline where human civilization could exist. Elena's accidental discovery of portal technology had essentially united Earth around the shared recognition that some threats required humanity to work together, regardless of political differences or national boundaries. Elena's breakthrough led to the development of entirely new technologies based on quantum field manipulation and dimensional engineering, creating innovations that improved everything from energy generation to medical treatment to space exploration. Humanity's accidental contact with interdimensional entities had ultimately accelerated scientific progress by decades, providing access to principles of physics that would have taken generations to discover through conventional research. 5 years after the interdimensional crisis, Elena stood in her laboratory at the Interdimensional Defense Headquarters, watching quantum field monitors that maintained constant surveillance over dimensional barriers worldwide. The technology she'd developed during her desperate mission to save infinite realities had evolved into a comprehensive defense network that ensured humanity would never again be vulnerable to conquest by entities from parallel dimensions. Elena's work had transformed her from a brilliant physicist into a guardian of infinite realities. But she never forgot the fundamental lesson her parents had taught her during 20 years of immigrant struggle in America. Sometimes, one person with enough determination really could change everything, and the responsibility to use your gifts to protect what mattered most was the greatest honor anyone could ever receive. The interdimensional war for the survival of every possible timeline had been won by a woman whose only weapons were brilliant scientific knowledge and stubborn determination inherited from parents who'd sacrificed everything to give their daughter the education she needed to save every world that had ever existed or ever could exist. Elena Vasquez had proven that in America, where the dreams of immigrants could still transform into the salvation of infinite realities, one person's courage and intelligence could protect the future of every possible version of humanity across the endless multiverse of parallel timelines, where freedom, family, and hope would always be worth fighting for.